Welcome everybody to the another exciting presentation. Very popular topic, AI, of course, but we'll see how this is blended, how modern technologies are blended into one efficient workflow, but with humans also included. So we'll see how these technologies and human expertise coexist in AUTODOC. So for the company AUTODOC, this is always interesting to hear different use cases, different takes on the modern technologies like AGT, machine translation, post-editing. The topic today will be presented by Kevin and Maria. And if you have questions later, feel free, and stage is yours.
All right, so as you've heard, my name is Kevin, and I will be telling you about AI-driven technologies and workflows at AUTODOC, with a special emphasis on the importance of humans. So here's a quick look at the table of contents, but we're not going to waste too much time on that, because we want to get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. And to help me today, I brought two AI-generated assistants, Auto and Doc, whom you may have seen in the opening slide, and also my very human and very important colleague, Maria, who will help with answering questions later on and who has supplied the technology that I'm presenting on. All right, so the Content and Translation Department at AUTODOC. So who are we? First off, AUTODOC is an online retailer for car parts and accessories, and we sell products to 7.4 million customers in 27 countries across the European Union and European Economic Area. The Swiss and the Norwegians don't like it when I just say EU. We have around 5,000 employees across locations in 10 different countries, and what that means for us is that we work with about 24 different languages, either as communication within internal things or because we translate it for the various websites where we work. So we proofread, translate, or create content in each of those 24 languages, and for that we have an in-house translation team. The content that we then end up creating comes in the form of marketing materials, product descriptions, and last but not least, copywriting. All right, now we work with a lot of stuff, so we figured maybe introducing AI to the process would speed things up, replace certain things, make the whole thing a lot easier, and save some stuff. And we formally started introducing ChatGPT after there were some experiments happening independently with some departments in May 2023. And what followed was several tests on how we could easily implement ChatGPT in particular to increase productivity. And we did a bunch of these. I'm going to focus on 3 of them, namely one where we compared AI to traditional machine translation tools, in this case ChatGPT versus DeepL, one where we tried to mass generate product descriptions, and the generation of copy for blog articles, link building, and so on. So, comparing ChatGPT and DeepL. We evaluated 2 sets of written instructions, because most of what we translate is either product descriptions, blog articles, or instructions for the various parts that we have. And then we had them translated via ChatGPT and DeepL into 19 different languages from English. We then generated LQA reports with memoQ to have a somewhat objective way to evaluate how good they were. And these are the results. For one, DeepL was generally better based on an average of the LQA scores. We assume this might be because since we were translating DeepL via memoQ, our translation memories were somewhat involved in this, and so it was better at getting terminology right. Human evaluation, ChatGPT felt better to our native translators giving their subjective opinions as it felt warmer, it felt more human when it was translating than DeepL did. But there was some pretty big discrepancy. So larger languages like German or French generally were better. Bulgarian was a complete disaster, according to our translator, and a lot of the other smaller languages, like Norwegian or the Baltic languages, didn't fare so well. And I'm going to go into later why that is the case. But however, both DeepL with a 0.87 and ChatGPT with an average of 0.8 failed to meet our high standard of 0.98 for our quality. And it kind of shows that we still need people to properly ensure that quality. Like, you can't just push a button and be done with it. So, the mass generation of product descriptions. So we currently offer around 5.8 million products, and each of those needs descriptions in 22 languages, plus a few more because we actually try to provide additional languages for additional languages for the different websites in Belgium, Luxembourg, and so on. So it's actually not just the 22 languages, but then we'll have like 4 different versions of German that we use as well. So this seems like a really good spot to try to do some automated generation, because 5.8 million times at least 22, it's more than 2. So the descriptions seemed like an ideal spot. We tested this, and we had some interesting results. So on the positive side, we were able to generate a high volume. So we did batch generations, and we could do up to 200 product descriptions per batch. We were able to generate rather quickly. You could generate about 100 at a rate of 100 per 50 minutes, which goes a lot faster than sitting down and writing those, let me tell you. And by using prompt templates, we were able to create a lot of these with variables, and it lets a lot of different people from a lot of different skill levels automate this process. Like, you don't need to know a lot. However, it didn't work out all that well, and here are the downsides. For one, the quality varied considerably and was often very low. You couldn't rely on it to properly provide quality product descriptions, and since these are the things that we show our customers, we want it to be correct. Not only because we love our customers, but because there are liability problems there. Terminology was also an issue. Often terms would be wrong, and this is also partially because some of the source material we had wasn't quite up to scratch. Now, a human reviewing this with a certain amount of technical knowledge and experience in that field would catch this and correct it, and you have a proper product thing. But a machine is just going to do what you tell it, and as a result, garbage in, garbage out, you get a bad translation. Similarity was also an issue. We prefer for our text to be very varied for SEO purposes, and many of the texts would just end up way too similar for that, and that failed to meet our standard in that regard. And fixing all of this by evaluating it took significantly more time than actually writing them from scratch. So all that time saved with that wonderful rate of creating like 100 per 50 minutes kind of evaporated when we needed to make sure that it worked. But we do have one case where we've met some success, and that is the hybrid copywriting of articles. So we use a bunch of different articles to generate traffic, blog articles, link building articles, and we've attempted to incorporate generative AI into this, and we've come up with a process that blends human expertise and creativity with certain automated aspects from machines. And the way that this worked for us was, for one, we increased productivity. So I don't know if any of you have done copywriting before. I have, and it's not fun. The hardest part for me is generally just sitting down, researching the topic, and then trying to figure out how I'm going to make an engaging article about a steering knuckle, for instance. All right? ChatGPT doesn't really have that problem. You give ChatGPT a prompt, you tell it, write this article, make it engaging about steering knuckles, and it'll do it. It'll research it, and it'll produce a text for you, and it might lie to you, but it's got a text for you. And let me tell you, reviewing a text and striking out the stuff that's wrong and fixing grammar or just changing sentences so they read more naturally, that does not take as much time as sitting down to read about steering knuckles and then trying to come up with a way to, make it engaging. So that was the laser. it resulted in efficiency and time savings. So copywriters were able to handle a much higher volume of texts with the incorporation of hybrid copywriting. So our turnaround time was about 40 minutes for a hybrid copywritten text versus 100 minutes for a text that was written from scratch with research. And all of this automation helped enhance creativity. So no longer spending all that time on researching or coming up with a format for the entire article to be written in, the human being could now try to find engaging ways to add anecdotes to the text or rewrite certain things to make it catchier, or the fun parts of writing an article versus the boring parts of researching. And all of this has led us to understand that the human touch is somewhat important. AI has limitations. So, and this is important to emphasize, it is a tool. It cannot really replace a human being in creating content or in translating. And here are some of the reasons why. As we've heard, it tries to predict what you want it to say, and if you ask it something that already phrases it in a way that isn't necessarily true, it'll answer in a way it tries to please you, and as such it can give you wrong answers. So it's not trying to necessarily be correct, it's just trying to make you happy. All right? So it's doing what you tell it to, not necessarily what you want it to do. And as a result, it still is prone to hallucinations. We had the wonderful example of the rocks earlier. My personal favorite hallucination was when I was running a couple of articles, not articles, I was doing Q&As about certain products and fact-checking them. I was given one question and answer, and it's like, are tire rims street legal in the UK? The answer was yes, as long as they don't obstruct your view of the road. Now, if a tire rim is blocking your view of the road, you have much bigger problems than not being able to see where you're driving. A human would catch that. AI did not. Now, granted, it's come a long way from those days. This was back in 3.5. 4 was a lot less prone to hallucinations, though in my experience, this was mainly because it was vague and unhelpful, and it would just describe things in a very neutral and pleasant manner. 4.0 is a bit more exact, and also more prone to hallucinations and making things up. Usually fake experts, such as a random name that then has a wonderful opinion, and then when I ask it where I found that opinion, it tells me it's a fictitious example. But they usually sound very convincing, and so one of the fun ways of hybrid copywriting there is like you can look up that opinion or a study if it makes a fictitious one up. Sometimes you'll actually find something that says the same thing or something similar, and then that actually supports your point. You just have to change who wrote it and what the title was. The other problem with ChatGPT and other AIs is that they are by their core nature derivative. And I mean, everything is in a way. There's nothing original in this world, supposedly. Most things are remixes of stuff that we've experienced, and that's not different for humans either. But there is a certain way that the predicting what you want it to say ties into this, is that because it's based on statistics, it tends to generate stuff that's very mainstream. When you try to get cartoon characters, like you'll often end up with something that looks like it comes from a Pixar movie. The text copies stuff that's from like all over the place and very familiar. And that is something that AI can do, but something unique and fresh is something that humans can add to this. Right? So that's, like if you want something derivative, sure, by all means, generate it with AI. But if you want something that is engaging and fresh and doesn't feel like you've seen it before, you need someone human to actually add creativity to it. Another aspect, and this ties into the smaller languages bit, LLMs are limited by what they are trained on. That is generally the internet, as with ChatGPT. It's going to be different things with others. But the large ones, the largest, it's the internet, and the internet is American. There are simply fewer articles in Norwegian and the Baltic countries and that, and so ChatGPT in my experience, is also just generally worse at those smaller languages. Our Dutch colleague has had wonderful conversations with ChatGPT and was able to generate articles directly using Dutch prompts and whatnot. Our Finnish colleague wanted to throw his computer out the window. And that's just, how it is. Some people might feel like smaller languages, we can just easily automate this now because it's just a small market, it's not as many, we can save a little bit here. But unfortunately, that's also where AI is absolutely the worst. And translators and those sorts are even less replaceable than one might think. So ChatGPT also in particular is prone to tantrums. So yeah, I've worked extensively with it. I've had a fun time where sometimes it would just simply forget that it can translate and tell me that it can't do that. My usual workaround is to say, oh, but you did it yesterday, and I believe in you, and that usually works. Sometimes it doesn't, and you just have to start up a new window. But yeah, this happens with alarming frequency, and you don't really feel like you want to be told by a tool that it can't do what it's been bought to do, right? So again, this is a limitation. This is one way that time cannot be saved. Yeah. So all of this means, of course, that proofreading remains key. Human proofreading is essential for ensuring quality. AI also just doesn't understand cultural nuances. And again, from the Q&A section, I was also generating them in French. Now, French uses different words for saying question and answer. So sometimes ChatGPT would just still use Q&A instead of the French letters required. And my favorite bit was French has a space between a colon and the last word in that sentence. ChatGPT would routinely erase that space. And when I asked why it did that, it told me that it would just read better, which I do not think our French customers would appreciate. So yeah, ChatGPT doesn't really understand these, especially non-American ones, since, as I said, it's trained on American English. So AI is also not just generally not good at being factually correct. It's good at, telling you what you want to hear. And as such, it is very good at sounding like it knows what it's talking about. So it can be very easy if you have no expertise or if you just trust it to listen to what it says. But you have to fact check. And you have to double check. At one point, I received a notification that flashlights were considered dangerous weapons in the UK if they rose above a certain amount of lumens. So I asked, all right, so where does that come from? And it cited the law that said that. And I looked up the law, and there was no mention of flashlights or lights in that in general. And when I asked again, it finally admitted, again, a fictitious example. So yeah, AI can't really evaluate the validity of source at the moment, and I don't think it ever truly will on its own. Yeah, we had the wonderful example with the rocks. I've seen the one where it's recommended, doctors recommend that you smoke 3 cigarettes a day while pregnant. And these are sources just plucked from the internet. A human could evaluate and figure out that The Onion is a satirical website that you don't want to cite from if you want to say something about eating rocks. An AI currently either needs to be trained on that by a human or have a list from its engineers, guardrails, or whatever. So again, the human ability to be able to figure out something is wrong is kind of paramount here. And so lastly, we have certainly experienced that AI has generated perfectly adequate articles that we could have uploaded without review, but you can't really rely on it to do that. And there is one more key aspect to all of this, and that is regulation. Regulation is coming, and so there's a couple things to keep in mind. The EU is bringing out the EU AI Act. It's basically on its way already. It still needs proper implementation. The way that it's generally targeted at the providers of large language models, but how that impacts us is that there is also a labeling required for AI-generated content. So if you generate something purely with AI, you need to let your customers or whoever's reading it know that it is generated. And I don't think customers are really going to trust AI as much as they will a human expert. Similarly, Copyright. Now, I have misled you slightly. I told you both auto and doc are AI generated. And that is true. But none of the images in here are. All of that was drawn by me, and as such, it's protected by copyright in Germany. However, anything AI generated without substantial human involvement is not. If you want your content to be yours, you need human beings to mess with it, do something with it, and I don't know how much. That is for a court to decide. More is better in this case. And lastly, Google and other search engines are facing issues regarding AI content polluting their search results. Image search in particular is bad for people like me as an artist. I like to look up reference, and I don't really appreciate it when I find Aztecs that have no hands and weird eyes. It's not helpful if I need to try and draw something. So Google and other search engines are going to have to do something to keep themselves relevant. Because if their search results don't work, nobody's going to use them. And that doesn't work well with advertisers. So something will happen. I don't know if it will be enough, but these are the things to keep in mind, to prepare for, and yeah. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I would like to ask my colleague Maria to come up to help answer questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much.